Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Michelle Rook with Boddicker Farmers Trading Company. Well, the livestock futures leaning mostly higher, except for deferred hog futures again today. And we were mixed over in the grains, corn and wheat lower. Soybeans a little bit higher though, Vince. So let's start off there. Has that been short covering? Because we've been up, the last 3 days in that market? Were we just oversold, or is this the push from the soybean oil market?
I think a lot of it's some technical, but I think most of it's that push from the soybean oil market, as we discussed. And you talked about Indonesia putting in some bans on veg oil and those things. And you get something going, and sooner or later you run out of sellers. You're going to get at least a little rally. And I think that's what you're seeing. Still amazed today. We've had, looking at that August soybeans, that 1161, 1162 areas held it. You got out there and went above that high just a little bit today and then fell off. We need to get a good close above, and maybe you can get to 12 or so, but unless you get something to change drastically, I don't see a lot more run than that.
Yeah. And the corn market basically got pulled down by wheat, or is that market just trading this great weather that we have in the central and eastern corn belt?
I think you've got the wheat market as part of it, but the lack of threatening weather is part of it. I talk to some customers that tell me how dry it is in southern Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Maybe it is. If we don't get rains coming through this weekend, maybe we get something going. But for the most part, trade isn't worried about that right now. With that extra acres that we picked up last Friday, I don't think they worry about what drowns it out or what you lose at this point, unless it gets somewhat serious.
Yeah, and that market obviously has not reacted well to not only the acreage number, but the quarterly stocks number from last week, right?
Yes. And as we discussed earlier, a little bit hard to believe the accuracy of that stocks number when corn export is much better than it's been the last couple of years. We have just as many hogs as we had. Yes, we have less cattle that we're slaughtering, but the weights are up, so they're really making up, if not killing more in comparison because of the weights than we were a year ago. So hard to believe those stocks are quite that high.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, it is what it is. And, we hit 3-year lows this week in the corn market and have kind of bounced off that level. But to get any more of an appreciable rally in the corn market, are we going to have some serious weather problem? Is that the only hope for that market?
Right now, that's probably the most logical. Could there be something else come up from USDA on a surprise or somebody else that we're not thinking of? Yes. But right now, the logical one would be the weather. And if we don't get something in the next week or two, you're going to be past a lot of that pollination where the trade isn't going to worry about it.
Yeah. So the wheat market back down here today. And of course, we had the pop on Monday. We've been down the last couple of days. We're past 50% on harvest. So where's the pressure coming from?
Again, I think when you look at all the grains, and let's just go back to that stocks report from last week, whether you look at corn, beans, or wheat, I found it unique that all of them were about 21% higher than a year ago. So if we didn't run out last year, why are we going to run out this year? I think that's part of the attitude and just nothing to get us going. Monday, as we discussed, I think a big part of that rally was voiced from the tomb buying on July 1st, and you fizzled after that. It would make a lot of sense. There was buyers there, see if they could goose the market. And I think we're putting in a pretty good bottom in that wheat, but I don't see any really extensive runs to the upside unless we get some fresh news that we're not aware of at the present time.
Right, because the Black Sea, the Russian news of their smaller crop has basically been worked into the market. And what would it take? An export ban or something like that to pop the market again? Or
I would guess if you want to look at it from a Russian side, yes. Their crop may be 20 plus million less than last year, but last year's was probably a little bit exaggerated on where they were at. But all in all, an 80 million metric ton crop still isn't a bad crop for Russia.
Yeah. And them putting a ban on is pretty unlikely, isn't it?
At this point in time, I would think so. If somebody comes up and they're going to do it, you got to believe it's down the road somewhat. If exports keep going at record pace, then they're running tight. But right now, they're going to keep pushing it out the door. They need the revenue, and they like the revenue.
So, Vince, specs are also short in this grain market in all three parts of the complex. Do you remember a time when we had the funds this short this time of year?
I think when you look at the corn, it's probably a bit ahead of it, but I think we got to go back and look at, I think it was 2013 through 2018, when it was nothing more than each year the crop got bigger and we keep bidding up the market. You feel like you're in a similar situation to where you were then, but I do know the funds are extremely short in the corn for this time of year. I can't put it there in the beans or the wheat, but their trend is definitely down, and the attitude is we have adequate supply, so why should we buy?
No doubt. And then you've got this flooding going on in the northwestern corn belt in your backyard there. And I know farmers get really frustrated because they're losing their crop and the market doesn't seem to care.
And it doesn't. And I think with the added acres that we put on last Friday and the report, the stocks, it's all part of it. But I think the other thing that we have to understand, the market is psychological in its nature, and a lot of that is the algorithms doing that. But the traders don't care if the farmer is making money or not. They only care if the market is moving in one direction or another so they can make money.
Yeah, true. Cattle market, let's talk about that one. I haven't seen much in terms of cash trade here on a Wednesday. The cattle market on the futures side of things, we went up and kind of made some new highs for the move, but we haven't taken those out here even with record cash. So are we going to continue to move sideways, do you think?
I would think that's a logical move in here, sideways to maybe even lower. The big key is now we've had a push the last 3 or 4 weeks, and we've gotten our choice box beef up to that 330 level, which was last year's cap. Yes, is cash higher than a year ago? It is, but now you're past that peak demand time of the year, and will the consumer continue buying beef or will they change? And I think that's the key. And I think that's what the packer is going to look for when he comes in on Friday. What does that retailer need? Is there somebody out there that wants to fill freezers, or they still got plenty of stock?
And the lower numbers, the lower slaughter is kind of being offset by higher weights. Talk about that.
It is, as you and I discussed in numbers 3 weeks ago, we're 39 pounds heavier on steers, or 37 pounds heavier on steers, and 29 on heifers. And I don't think that has changed a lot. But to try to put a context on it, at that current weight, it's like adding 28,000 head a week to the kill. And if we look at USDA's current projection of 1.434 million head less slaughtered than last year, if we continue with these weights and don't drop them over a year's time, we'd actually kill 29,000 head more than we did last year. So the key here is, I understand that the producer is feeding them heavier because feeders are high priced and they don't want to replace them, and they can make it look better this way, but in the long run, you're shooting yourself in the foot by getting them too heavy.
No doubt. And let's wrap up with the hog market here. We've continued to see the bull spreads work here recently, even though Hogs and Pigs report indicated, we do have a lot of upfront supplies here. So what's going on in that market?
I think the trade got beat up pretty good, and probably not a lot of sellers down at this level. So you're just playing the game of, let's play the upfront months and not do a lot in the back months more than anything. And if we can hold those lows of the last couple of weeks, I think we're okay. I don't think we're going to run away, much like that cattle market. I think it's going to be sideways, probably less chance of going lower than you have in the cattle market. But our key, as we discussed, is still that cutout market and the lack of performance from the bellies in here. And for whatever reason, you have to really believe that's from a lesser demand, or let's call it lack of demand, from that fast food restaurant industry.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch for sure. All right, thanks, Vince. Vince Boddicker, Farmers Trading Company, that is Markets Now.